If there isn't a debate, then your reason for saying to someone that something is wrong is, well, because I said so.
Yeah.
Either you accept things on authority and you expect other people to expect them on the basis of authority, or you are able to offer them an argument, some reasons why they should believe it. And that's what I'd like this to be about. And saying there is a debate about everything. And you only have to look at old Kwasi-Kwarteng and his mini budget. You could either think everything was better and the world was normal, and then this man did something monumentally stupid. I don't think that's the case. You might think, and it might be that he did some unwise things, but it was within the context of unsolved problems that went all the way back to the end of 2007.
So nothing's changed since 2008, the fallout.
The things which weren't working in that financial machine still aren't working. They've poured a lot of lubricant in to make it work, but I don't think they've fixed the underlying logic. I think what I would like to aim for is suggesting to people better questions, because I think if you just think you've got an answer and you shout it out, well, A, it's annoying, and B, I'm not sure anyone believes you. If you can ask someone a more difficult question, a better question.
Yeah. I mean, it's good that you have some knowledge about these things that you're asking the questions for, to understand what the question should be. And I think that's where I fail miserably.
Thanks for joining us. My name is David Malone.
And I'm Ian Stroud. Welcome to Hyperland. Hello, David.
Hello, Ian. As I said, my name's David Malone. Some of you will know who I am, that I used to write the GolemXIV blog, which I let slide. I sort of stopped writing much in about 2000, I don't know when it was, about 15, which I feel bad about, really, because...
You should.
Thanks, Ian. No, I do. I do generally feel bad about it, because the lovely thing about that that blog was the community of people that gathered around it. Yeah. And they were a lovely community of people who contributed. In the end, they were contributing more ideas and insights than I was. So I felt bad about letting them down. But I did so just because, on a personal level, I just ran out of emotional energy for all kinds of complicated reasons. And also, I began to feel that the things I was complaining about, the things I was writing about when it came to finance particularly, and politics, is I felt the same idiots were making the same idiotic mistakes over and over and over again. And I started to feel like all I'm doing is saying the same things are wrong in the same way. And I thought, no one's learning anything. It's boring for me to write and boring for people to read. And so I just sort of thought, this is pointless. But I do now genuinely feel that the financial shenanigans are kicking off again.
They're back.
In a way they were always going to. And that I do feel we have genuinely moved on in quite significant ways to a different political world.
Yeah.
And so, well, I chatted to Ian. I met Ian about it.
Hello.
And he said, I think we should do a podcast. And I said, what the hell is a podcast?
Me for this.
I am very definitely blaming you for this. I'd never thought about a podcast.
I absolutely remember it the other way around.
Well, this is a good start. Well, go on. You tell them why you're doing this, because you're in it at least as much as me.
I am. And just to pick up on what you were saying about the blog, I kind of saw you as the gardener at the blog. You planted the seed, and as you said, it was the community and you that then together shaped and grew ideas. And I didn't come to it until we worked together 2017?
16 or 17, I can't remember which now.
That's when I first came to it. So it was totally refreshing. I hadn't come across anything like it before, and I loved it. And I don't think you should stop it. I just think maybe it'll be a nice place to even comment on things that you talk about in the podcast. So whether people continue that communication, or we've set up a Facebook page, the GolemXIV podcast. So hopefully that will be another place for perhaps a wider audience to check in and just take the ideas, question them, and see where they go. Really. So I mean, that's what I'm delighted to be here, mate. I'm also shitting myself.
Well, for me, I'm just until we've done a few, I'm not. I don't know whether the kind of thing we were doing in the blog translates into the spoken format. Because the thing about a blog is it's the written format. You make an argument. It's quite tight, whereas you can't just sit and read out a tightly written blog. It's more discursive, which is the nice part.
Yeah. One thing I see about the podcast is it being spontaneous, and it's not written down. You don't know where it's to go, but I've got a confession to make.
What's that? Okay.
I was so worried about this first podcast in explaining what we're doing and who we are that I've written some notes down.
Starting off cheating, I haven't.
I know, but I promise I'm not going to do it for any of the other ones. It's just I think I was overthinking. I just find the way my head works. I'll start talking about one thing and hey, next minute I'm at somewhere else.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was trying to think about what we actually achieved at the blog, so I went back and read a few of them. And it changed. It genuinely did. But there were two parts to it, I think. I'm hoping some people will write in comments and tell us what they think the blog was about. But sometimes it was just delivering new information.
Yeah.
So, or at least new to me. I would read around and go, okay, so that's what a credit default swap is, and these are the banks who are using them most, and so I felt like the blogs were actually delivering solid information. But then, certainly as it went on, it also started to evolve to become more theoretical and political. And what I began to feel was that I, at least, was sketching out for myself a different view of the way the world looked than the view which was being presented to me by the BBC or the Guardian or the Tory Graph or the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
And but that second thing, much as I think it's really important, is a bit more nebulous. And then you step back from it, you think, okay, well, yeah, but is your way of viewing things worth taking people's time up with?
Yeah.
It's no good nodding. You've got to say something over there as well.
I know. I'm kind of like...
Ian's got stage fright. See, he's used to just sitting behind the banks of machinery and just making it all work. So now that he's got a microphone in front of me, he's
It's like, oh God, I've got to say something.
Well, tell us what your view of that is.
Well, no, I mean, I've been an editor for 35 years, and I've worked on factual entertainment programs, which have basically been history, geography, science. But I've also done a lot of observational documentaries, which has been following people around, whether it's people that have cancer, it's prison officers, comedians, farmers, young offenders, a complete mix of stuff. And I love the job of editing, but I've always felt I need to understand the message that I'm telling. I need to connect with the people that the observational documentary are following. And if I don't do that, then I've kind of failed. So it's an important part of editing is to do the understanding. And I think from sitting in the edit, you learn to look at multiple perspectives. And that's what I liked from your writing in the blog.
Well, I mean, I would not ever have done a podcast on my own. And people have suggested over the years, because apparently podcasts are a thing. But the reason I thought, all right, I'll do it with Ian is because of the experience of editing. It's something we both know a lot about. And from my point of view, I can't imagine sitting with all of the rushes that I would have gone out and shot and being able to edit it myself. I mean, there are people who do that. I've got friends and colleagues who are brilliant filmmakers, and somehow they can do the whole thing. I can't do that.
Yeah.
The stuff comes alive for me when you've got an editor that you trust and get along with sitting next to you, who's looking at it in a slightly different way, and it's in that exchange that for me, even though I went out and shot the stuff and I asked the questions and I set up the shots, somehow it comes alive when it's in that exchange between you and me. And so that's why I thought, all right, maybe this will work. I mean, if you buggered off tomorrow, then that would be the end of the podcast, because I don't think it would work with just me sitting here in my little room going, hello, David Malone, about to tell you the way the world is. No, it's not going to work.
I know, but I think there's another thing that we had in television, and it was called, rather rudely, it was sort of dumbing down.
Oh my God, yes.
No, but it's
not rude, it's just a tragedy.
Well, no, there's two sides of it. Yes, there's one side of it that things get dumbed down. And I think behind that really is to appeal to the widest possible audience. And therefore to get the most ratings. But I think there is a better understanding of that if you start the journey, if you start the narrative, you've got to at some point assume some kind of knowledge. Now, if you assume a knowledge that is right down at the bottom, then you're going to come across as patronizing. But then if you come in too high, then there is a danger of alienating people.
All right, yeah, fair enough.
So there's a sweet spot, but in terms of the blog, a lot of it, without the sort of commentary, I might not understand bits, but with the people feeding more information in, you go off. And there was one guy that I came across, Mark Blythe, who's Dundee born. I forget his exact title, but I think he's at Brown University. It's fascinating, and you know, I sit there for hours just, this is great, and I think that's it. It's the journey that you go on, and you don't know where you're going to end up anyway.
For me, the podcast will work if we manage to do a bit of both. I would. My worry is that it would just devolve down into two blokes chatting about stuff, but without delivering anything solid. But at the same time, you can't just sit here and read out a long list of facts that you have prepared. It's got to be something more than that. And it's also, and this is just a sort of a truism that people are talking about a lot. The other thing is, we are in this period, it seems to me, where it's not that people can't talk to each other, but it does seem like people have pulled themselves into little silos. And when I read something like The Guardian, which being left-wing, I would generally over the years have read The Guardian as opposed to The Times.
Others.
But I now read The Guardian through gritted teeth because it seems so self-congratulatory. You know, it's got that little blurb after all the articles saying, you know, in this time of misinformation and disinformation, we need more than ever to have something where it's just telling you the truth. And I read The Guardian and go, mate, this isn't just the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, I parted company completely with The Guardian. It was already tenuous, but with their coverage of COVID, I thought it was despicable. Yeah. And I choose the word carefully. I thought it was genuinely despicable. I'm not sure. I mean, I read a lot of that and I thought, they're lying. And then I thought, do they think they're lying, or do they think that, there's parts of the truth that they're just never mentioning, but those parts of the truth would lead us all astray, so it's best not to mention them in front of the children. So they genuinely think it's important everyone see the world in the way that we're presenting the world to them, and if that means we've got to carefully not tell them certain things, then that's all for the greater good. And I think it's that. I think people are defending views of the world which they think, it's for the greater good that I'm not telling people things. And I really, really find that very worrisome, because you end up with groups of people, each group is convinced that the way they see the world is the only way that's going to protect us all.
But then I might throw that back in you and sort of say, well, David, what you're saying is, it's your belief, it's your opinion.
Yeah. And you're right, of course. But I think, so at least you've then got to say that up front and say, look, this isn't the truth. This is the way I see the world. And here's why I see it this way. But it's just a way of seeing it.
I lost my parents over the last 5 years. My mum to cancer, my dad had dementia, and then died of COVID. And coming out of that, I mean, I went to a pretty dark place and it was lonely and very numb. And I think over the past maybe 12 months, as you're coming out, you do feel as if you've been away.
Mhm.
And as I'm coming sort of back, I'm looking around and I'm where am I?
I know that feeling. I had that feeling from a few years before
Yeah.
when, for all kinds of reasons, I completely withdrew from well, virtually everything. And I've never thought about it that way, but you're right. You do have that feeling of
You go
emerging
away.
into a place that
Yeah.
you think, I don't really recognize this place anymore. But is that also just because you're getting older? Because
Well,
I'm older than you are, but there's something. My 50s were difficult for all
Yeah.
kinds of reasons, and now I'm 60, and I think maybe it's just that. Maybe I'm just turning into Victor Meldrew.
Well, I do see myself as a cross between Victor Meldrew and Jack D. But the other thing, and a bit like you, I don't know precisely whether it was coming out of grieving and that numbness, or whether it was the loss of your parents. For me, certainly, I looked up to them and things. You're looking for some kind of direction, and you look at a lot of the news outlets. They don't seem to be leading. They seem to be following and catching up a lot of the time. And I can say the same. You've touched on it with journalists. I don't know whether they're there to entertain, a bit of tittle tattle. Is it news? I'm really at a loss.
Oh, it's interesting you talking about missing your parents and looking up to them. Funnily enough, I still write to my mum.
Wow.
I write letters to her when I need to.
Yeah.
And it really works. Because I thought to myself, when she was alive, I would write a letter. So you put your thoughts down, you write a letter, you put it in the envelope, you go, stick a stamp on, and off it goes into the post box.
Yeah.
And you don't hear anything back. And I thought, well, what's the difference?
Yeah.
And I found writing, so I do. And it's really,
that's
I've
really
got a
good.
whol stack of letters. When I need to, I say, "Dear Mum."
Yeah.
And I tell her what's going on, which is funny for a 60-year-old man, but it works. I think what I miss and what I would like back, and I'm hoping other people would like back, is the feeling that feeling of being somehow on the outside of the mainstream is bearable if you feel there are other people outside with you, that you form a little Zamazdat community of people who don't all have to agree. In fact, it's quite nice when you don't, because you think we're not just sort of a wandering little tribe of clones who all go, yes, we can all think for ourselves, like in The Life of Brian. It's much nicer to think that there's a group of grown-ups out there who can think separately and independently, but enjoy getting together and knowing that they don't agree on things.
Yeah.
And that feels like home to me.
Go back to how we met. Why Are We Here? That you did with Ard Louis and David Strachan.
David Strachan, who I have to say, one of the very few really lovely people in broadcasting. It is a short list, but he's on it.
But that was definitely one of the most difficult projects that I worked with because, I'm not a scientist. So you're thrown into Roger Penrose talking about the invention of imaginary numbers. It's not
Roger the Dodger. I love Roger.
And then Greg Chaitin, he was talking about randomness and creativity.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just all beautiful things. And Sunetra Gupta.
Mm-hmm. I hope we're going to have Sunetra on. She crops up in bird flu. She's doing work on a university. Well, I hope to.
She was a biologist.
She's a biologist up at Oxford, and we interviewed her. What was in program 4? But it'll come up when we do the bird flu.
Well,
podcast.
she talked about science having a narrative.
She does, yes.
And then when she was talking about the sublime, it's where angels fear to tread.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just beautiful. But that, for me, it was a little playground in my mind. It's that discovery that I liked. And that's what hopefully I get from you.
Well, hopefully people who contribute. Yeah. Should we talk a bit about some of what we hope to do?
Yeah.
Well, as I said, we will do one on bird flu. And the reason for that is just that it's come up in a lot of research that I've been doing recently. I was updating a lot of research for COVID.
Because you did a documentary for Channel 4 a couple of years ago.
Channel 4, yeah, on the origin of COVID, a film which didn't make us any friends. I don't get many Christmas cards, and now I'm getting fewer.
Yeah.
But despite the fact that everyone and their auntie said they were going to sue us,
Nobody
did,
Yeah.
for the simple reason that every single thing we said in there, we had 3 independent confirmations of, because the Channel 4 lawyer crawled all over us. If you put a comma in, he said, can you prove that comma should be there? That's the most painful experience. But it meant that despite the fact that everyone hates what we had to say, none of it is false.
So you'll be updating. We'll do one on the updating COVID and where we are now.
Yeah, and I'm hoping I can say some of the things which got left out of that film, because I felt annoyed about how much got left out.
But even since you made it, the scientists, or some scientists, are still coming out with things that aren't necessarily...
They're still playing the same trick. They've got some tentative evidence, and on one side of the argument, the smallest piece of tentative evidence, they go, oh, so we found the answer. Yeah, what we said, that it's natural origin. Yeah, now it's proved. And it's not been proved over and over. And again, it's not been proved.
Do you know what?
What?
That leads me straight to banks.
Well, yes, there's another group of people who've always got the world sorted until it isn't. Yeah, well, that is the other reason.
That's
that we
hit
both
the
thought,
headlines.
let's get back to this, because nothing's been fixed since 2007-8. Really hasn't been. And
so we'll have a chat with that, and hopefully, I know you've got a friend Jonathan
Sugarman,
hopefully we can get to talk to him.
I'd love to get him on. People from the blog will know who he is. If anyone listening who doesn't, he was arguably one of the most important whistleblowers in the financial crash of 2007-8 onwards, and how the authorities have tried to bury him and the story, and the nature of the story they're trying to bury does point right at the heart of the problem. And Jonathan has never knuckled under. Mm-hmm. It's cost him a lot, but he's never knuckled under.
And another interesting topic is AI, and that seems to with GPT and...
Well, I got interested in that when... colleague of mine called Leanne Pooley, who's a very talented filmmaker in New Zealand. She phoned me up, all apologetic, said, oh, David, I don't know, I'm really sorry. She was apologising before she'd even told me what it was. She said, I'm going to make this film about AI, but it's all talking to these AI specialists, and, I'm more of a people director.
Yeah.
And she is. Said, I don't really want to do it. Would you mind doing all the interviews?
Yeah.
And I remember saying to her, no, wait a minute, hang on, Leanne. Let me just get this straight. You want to pay me more money than television normally pays me, and I'm going to get to talk to a whole lot of interesting people, and then you're the one who has to make it make sense in the cutting room. Which bit of this do you think I wasn't going to like? But she was all apologetic. Oh, would you mind? Would I mind? I'd love to. It sounds great. So she did. I interviewed about, I don't know, it was between 30 and 40 people.
Yeah.
Often not the top people, not the person who founded Google, because they won't talk to you.
Yes, no, of course.
The people one rung below them, and more importantly, the very knowledgeable scientists in the field.
Yeah.
And it was really, really interesting, and left me with more questions to ask than we'd answered in the film. So yeah, there's a lot more I'd like to say about that.
And in the future, we're going to see you the less well-educated Malone in the family?
Well, actually, it's the other way around. I'm at that age now where, I used to be the cleverest person in the family. Come on, kids, let me tell you about this. It was like when we used to go on holiday. I'd be at the front carrying the big pack going, come on, kids, you'll enjoy it.
Look now, over there. Yes.
Now I'm at the back going, kids, slow down. I think I might be having a coronary. So they're all in their 20s now, and they're all starting PhDs, and the eldest is a couple of years in. So very soon, apart from the dog, I'm going to be the worst educated person in the whole family.
Yeah.
So he's doing a PhD at UCL, and he's involved in the chemistry of the hydrogen economy.
Yeah.
And I was chatting to him recently, and he's involved in quite really interesting discussions that are happening between high-level civil servants, leaders of industry, and top researchers. And because it's such a small field, even though he's only 2 years into a PhD, he's in there. He's in there saying, "Yeah, come along." And he was just saying that the discussions they're having are already beginning to sketch out what our national energy policy is going to have to be, given the underlying science. So I thought it'd be great to hear about.
It would be great, yeah. And parallel to all of this, you're also still writing?
Oh. I wish you hadn't brought that up, really. Yes, I started writing a book called RGB. That's its working title anyway.
No, I think people would just like to know, especially the people that have come from your blog, where you go and what to be expected in the future.
Well, I'd very much like to finish it. I've written a third.
Yeah.
And then...
That took about a week.
And then, as you do, you run out of money. And you think, okay, I better do something else. So, you go off and you make a COVID film or something.
Yeah.
Because nobody pays you to write books anymore. And although I really want to do it, and I'm very excited by the ideas in it, it's a science book. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Not a whole lot.
No, it's a flavour. It's I think people are just interested to sort of. I certainly am. I'm kind of like the inside of Mr. Malone's head. But it's a weird and wonderful place.
But we'll talk about democracy and globalization too.
Yeah. No.
So it will be a lot of finance, some politics, and quite a lot of science.
Good.
The main thing I hope, apart from people actually listening and getting something out of it, is if people would like to comment and offer their own thoughts. The one and only rule I ever had was that people should be polite. Because there's plenty of places on the internet where you can yell and shout and call each other names. And the blog and the podcast, they're not those places.
Not allowed.
So it'd be lovely if people comment. Then we will pick up on those comments, and in a podcast we'll actually address them and discuss the points that other people raise. It would be great.
That's lovely. Thank you, David.
Cheers, Ian. See you on the next one.
Bye.